So one of the things I like to share with youth groups before we go on these kayaking trips in the San Juans or Ross Lake and those kind of places is, what would I take? How would I select the dry bags that I need to containerize the gear? What's going to go in those dry bags? How would I pack it? And how is all this going to be facilitated in going into a kayak? And so don't be overwhelmed by the selection of things I brought today. It's more to give you various types of options. And it's quite frankly, it's my hope that most of you will have something in your own quiver of clothing and camping gear already to facilitate and answer most of these categories. There's only going to be one or two specialized things I'm going to point out that you may want to consider possibly buying. But for the most part, you should have most of this stuff. So we're going to start out talking first about dressing for kayaking. There's only 3 ways you can dress. 2 of them are for the water, and 1 of them is not for the water at all. One of the ways to dress for kayaking would be in a wet clothing system. A wet clothing system would be things like a Farmer John wetsuit, typically like this. It's about 3 millimeters thick. It's closed cell foam rubber. Then people typically would wear over that they would wear on their torso some sort of a synthetic long sleeve shirt. If you do other types of sports like water skiing or snorkeling or different kinds of sports, maybe you've worn things they refer to as rash guards, stretchy synthetic shirts. You might wear this underneath, this Farmer John, the arms would, come sticking out. And then over the top of it, you would wear what we refer to as a splash jacket type top, and it might have some kind of a neoprene closing neck and maybe some kind of neoprene at the wrist that adjusts, and maybe some sort of a drawstring at the bottom. This would constitute a wet clothing system. Water's going to infiltrate the system. Your body's going to warm up that thin film of water, and theoretically that's going to keep you a little bit warmer in the water. Now that's a pretty common system for sea kayaking up until about 1990, because it's really the only thing we had. After 1990, waterproof breathable dry suits were created out of materials like Gore-Tex. So this is a complete suit, dry suit. It's completely dry. It has waterproof zippers, rubber gaskets at the wrist, rubber gaskets at the neck. It has attached socks, and there's an air layer inside of here that keeps you nice and warm. You wear polyester long underwear, merino wool, different things like that layered under here. Keeps you very, very warm, very, very efficient. Unfortunately and this actually gives you extended survival time in the water and pretty much would completely negate the danger and hazard of the cold water. The challenge is it's incredibly expensive and exotic. It runs around $1,200 and up to buy it, and it rents for about $100 a week, which is a good deal for something that expensive, but typically would add $100 just to the cost of your trip. So very few church or scout groups that I work with rent dry suits, and the only people who would have them would be enthusiasts who do this a lot and can justify the cost of it. But this is a very sophisticated clothing system that would negate the hazards of the cold water. I don't recommend the neoprene type solution because, quite frankly, if it was thick enough to truly give you long-term survival in the water, you couldn't stand to wear it. This is only about 3 millimeters thick. It's typically used by people who go like whitewater rafting on a river like the Wenatchee or something in Western Washington. And you fall in the river, you can get out of the river pretty quickly by swimming to the shore. The shore's not very far away. So this provides adequate insulation in a rafting situation. But in a sea kayaking situation, you're kind of fooling yourselves because it's really not that much survival time. Now, if you own this type of apparel and you want to wear it in June when we do your training, feel free to bring this type of stuff and wear it when we're doing our training. But I would not recommend you go out and purchase it or rent it for your actual trip. it would not really be that more effective than what we're going to talk about, the third category. So the third way we would dress for sea kayaking would simply be, we're going to wear synthetic or wool outdoor apparel, outdoor clothing like you use when you're backpacking and hiking. And the goal would be, first of all, you're not likely to capsize in the first place. If you do capsize, we're going to train you how to right the boat really quickly, pump the water out. In the act of pumping the water out, you're going to warm up. And then we're going to have you get to shore as quickly as possible. And so even though these other in-the-water protective clothing systems are the way to go if you were truly a participant in kayaking and it was your hobby and your passion, you would end up acquiring that type of specialized apparel. For your purposes for this one trip, there's no reason that you need to have that other type of apparel. So what we're going to do now is we're going to dress somebody basically from head to toe, as I would dress them. And we're going to start with some form of sun hat.
Are you not dressing me?
Just figuratively.
Figuratively speaking.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But I don't mind you being awake and willing to volunteer. Awesome. So we need some form of sun hat. And that can pretty much be any old hat that you like, your favorite sun hat. You're going to need some kind of sunglasses. And you're going to need some kind of a keeper strap so that they don't fall off. So some kind of keeper strap. You're going to want to have some kind of synthetic shirt. This happens to be a shirt from a synthetic shirt made up for a kayaking event. It's called They Were Exceedingly Valiant. And pretty nice shirt made up by a group for their trip. Some kind of synthetic bathing suit. In this case, has a built-in brief system, quick drying. An alternative that I really like and promote besides a synthetic t-shirt would be a thing called a synthetic hoodie. So this is a long sleeve product with a hood. And it's very comfortable to wear, it's synthetic, it's quick drying, and provides really good sun protection. And then some sort of appropriate footwear. And I'm going to give you one example and talk about several others. So this is kind of the ideal footwear. This is a pair of neoprene booties. It's protective enough when you're walking that you're not going to hurt your foot, but it's flexible enough that when you're in the kayak, you can feel what we refer to as the foot braces or the foot pedals. But you certainly don't have to have something like this. Other alternatives would be things like you could have a pair of old running athletic shoes, okay? They just have to be the kind that you're willing to get wet. They can't be your fancy, nice, I don't know what the popular tennis shoe is now, but your $150, $200 Air Jordans or something. You wouldn't want to be wearing those. You want some sort of shoe that you can abuse. The more flexible it is, the better. You could make it slightly warmer and improve its performance if you actually had something like neoprene socks in it. Water will go over the top, but your foot will warm it up, and your foot will your foot will be still wet, but your foot will be warm and wet. So that would be an example of a kind of footwear. It could be something like this that maybe, but the thing about this that you don't know about is why this is good is this particular one has actually a cinching system built into it underneath this cover that cinches it onto your foot, so it's going to stay on your foot. This is a form of neoprene booties come in different configurations. They can have zippers or not zippers. And then this is an example of a very specialized boating shoe, and what makes it different than that athletic shoe is you can see how incredibly flexible the sole is. But yet it still has a sole that's going to protect my foot. You don't have to have this specialized stuff. I'm showing it to you so you could try to emulate it in whatever footwear you already might own. Now, footwear that's totally inappropriate is flip-flops. They're not going to stay on your feet, or any kind of crocodile. Now, or even any kind of sports, if If you don't have the neoprene booties I've been talking about, but you own some sort of sports sandals, you can certainly use them. I'm not telling you can't if you already own some sort of sports sandal. I prefer not using sports sandals for the actual boating because they're too stiff and boardy. You can't really feel the foot braces or the rudder pedals as well. They can also get caught up on stuff in the kayak as you're getting in and out of it, as you're bailing out of it when it capsizes. Now, absolutely love these things for camp wear. So I always take this type of footwear for camp wear, but I don't take it for being in the boat. But if this is all you have, you certainly could bring it. These are examples of footwear I absolutely would not wear in the boat. They won't stay on your feet. As soon as you bail out, they're going to float away. They're lost. You don't have the protection when you walk on the ground. But they also would make good camp wear. The camping is so mellow that you could certainly wear flip-flops as your camp shoe, or you could wear Crocs as your camp shoe. So that's your choice and your call. Besides a bathing suit with a built-in brief, I can mention a couple other options. You can certainly use shorts, So some of you may prefer board shorts, style shorts, swimsuits that don't have any kind of internal brief. Running shorts, here's a pair of Brooks running shorts. They have a built-in brief. And here's a pair of Solomon longer running type shorts that doesn't have a brief. My experience with these is I am not fond of the shorts with the built-in brief, even though it's convenient and they work great for a day trip. On multi-day trips, they tend to chafe, and I don't really like them. I much prefer wearing some sort of a short, like a board short, and then wearing some sort of synthetic polyester, polyester long underwear fabric, but in some sort of a boxer brief or brief. Again, I prefer the boxer style brief because of the less chafing that goes on typically. So that's kind of the basic outfit we would have dressed the person with. And then we're going to go ahead and proceed to this bag. So one of the pieces of gear that you might not currently own, but I highly recommend, and I'm going to be specific about this brand, is an IKEA tote bag. I can't tell you enough how important it is, I think, for every person to have one of these IKEA tote bags. And this is how you containerize your own personal gear. When you're driving in the cars and trucks and vehicles, you would bring your gear in this bag. When you get to the place we call the put-in, where you're going to put the boats in, you take this from the car down toward the beach where the boats are. You take the stuff out of here, pack it into your kayak. This goes with you on the trip. When you get where you're going, you pull the stuff out of your kayak, you put it in your IKEA bag, and you carry the IKEA bag to your campsite. And the reason is that sometimes you might have a little bit of a walk from where the boat actually lands to where the actual place you pitch your tent and lay your sleeping bag out. And so these IKEA bags are incredibly handy. And so highly, highly recommend them. So we're going to pull out of this IKEA bag what I would pack in the kayak. You're going to want to have some kind of water bottle. Notice that if I've got camp wear shoes that are bulky, I don't have to put these in a dry bag. I can pack them somewhere loose in the kayak. And the idea is that the kayak, those of you that have gone backpacking before, the kayak is the backpack. What you're going to do is now load the kayak with all of your stuff as if it's the backpack. Because the spaces that you're packing are very irregular shaped, very triangular shaped, or very wedge shaped. They're not very uniform. They have kind of unusual shapes to them. So it's important to have really small bags that will fit through the hatches of these kayaks, because they have hatches on the deck. You open these hatches up and put your bags down inside of them. And so I'm going to show you what I consider to be appropriate bags. I have one for the tent. I have one for my clothing. and I have one for my sleeping bag. And these 3 bags are all the same size. And one of them isn't even all that necessary, quite frankly. You could get along without a bag for your tent. There's other ways you could deal with your tent. But if you happen to get bags for your tent, I'll talk about that in a second. But I highly recommend is that you have at least 2 bags of this approximate size and shape. One for your sleeping bag and one for your clothing. Now, in an ideal world, I'm going to show you these ideal bags, but if you don't have the resources to purchase or make these or whatever, you can certainly use stuff sacks that your sleeping bag in all likelihood already came in. And what I would have you do is, and you can use this same concept for your clothing, is to get a nylon stuff sack and then line it with a plastic garbage bag. And I like to use the size plastic bags that are called trash compactor bags. And these hold up quite well. So what we're doing here is the nylon sack is providing the durability when you're packing this in the kayak, because there's all sorts of sharp little pointy objects inside of the kayak that can damage bags. So you wouldn't want to just try to shove it in here in a plastic bag. This is providing protection and wear and tear, but the plastic bag is providing the waterproof integrity. So you need at least this method or some sort of fancy dry bag to solve it. And just so you can see, this is an example. It's nothing in particularly all that special. It's whatever type sleeping bag you typically use when you go backpacking. This particular one happens to be about a 2.5 pound synthetic sleeping bag, rated at maybe about 30 degrees or something. It's more than adequate for the temperatures in Ross Lake or the San Juans in a mummy bag shape. I want to show you that in fact it will also pack, a similar type bag would pack in a wedge-shaped bag. So in this particular instance, I'll get to that in a second, why it has a bell on it. Here's a synthetic sleeping bag that's not even a mummy bag, it's even rectangular shaped. What matters is that you have a sleeping bag that's stuffable, it will go down in size to this kind of configuration that will go through the hatch of the kayak. While I'm mentioning it, you'll notice that this particular one has this little bit of ribbon and a bell on it. Not sure why the person put this bell on here, but I do know why they put some decoration. If you all have the same exact brands of bags and they all are the exact same color, and unless they're your personal ones and you've written your name on them like I have and my phone number, there are a bunch of new bags all on the beach. You want to put some kind of identifying something on the bag. If you borrow a bag from somebody, don't plan on slapping a slab of duct tape on there and taking a Sharpie and writing your name. As soon as you do that, you just bought that bag. Because when you peel that duct tape off, you leave a really hideous residue that you can't get off. So don't plan on labeling bags using duct tape. Put some sort of a luggage label on it or ribbon or something to identify it. So you want to have a dry bag for your sleeping bag. I can't sleep on cold, hard ground, but you can certainly use closed cell foam sleeping pads and take those. I need some sort of softer pad. So I take, a self-inflating Thermarest type pad. It doesn't have to be in a dry bag. You can find fancy, long, skinny dry bags like this, but you don't have to have one of these. I'm just showing it just for if you want to. But you'll notice I went ahead and left my pad in the nylon stuff sack it came with. And the reason I did that is that this urethane coating on the inside of these bags is kind of sticky. And so by putting my pad in the bag it came with, it's slipperier and it will slide into that dry bag even better. Is that making sense? Now I mentioned, I'm going to get to the clothes last, but I mentioned a tent doesn't necessarily even have to be in a dry bag. But if you have the luxury and the ability to get a dry bag, This is the same size dry bag as this one, just rolled down further. And I wanted to show you that in here is a 3-person dome tent that packed that small. Here's the tent stakes. Here's the tent body. Here's the rain fly. So was that all of it? The poles, so as soon as you separate the poles and pack them separate from those, you can make those get really small. And there's no reason to pack the poles with the tent. So what I do is pack them with my foam pad. So there's the tent poles for that particular dome tent and the sleeping pad. Now, other objects that you might take with you might be some sort of toiletries. They don't have to be packed in with your clothing. They can be packed in some kind of sophisticated Ziploc bag or something, shoved somewhere in the tent or in the kayak. And then this is still in its packaging, but this is an example of a zippered waterproof pouch I was able to buy at REI recently for my wife who's going on a trip to the Caribbean. I put a first aid kit in here. It fits really quite nicely. Again, these type of things don't have to be packed in with your clothing. Take any sort of electronics, and I know that's up to your leaders and whether you take that or not, but a lot of times we carry cell phones now because there's various apps on the phones that allow us to help with things like navigation and other types of things we would want to have. Those type of things need to be protected in something that has rigid structure with like latching, clamping type things with O-ring type rubber seals. And so I have a box like this. This particular box will hold my cell phone, my wallet, and my car keys quite easily. I just wanted to, the thing to take away from that is that I packed the bulky things like shoes and the toiletries and the first aid separate from the clothing gear. Now, when you're actually out on the water, it's not easy to access the hatches on the boats, nor is it advisable when you're actually out on the water to get things out of those hatches, because as soon as we open those hatches when you're out on the water, rogue waves could wash over the boat and put water in those hatches and things like that. So generally speaking, we don't access those hatches while we're actually traveling. So I recommend a bag I call the carry-on bag. And I recommend it be about 5 liters. So this is an example of the carry-on bag. And I'm going to show you what I would put in it. So I'd have my water bottle handy, and this would go in the cockpit of the boat where I'm sitting, typically down between my legs, where I could open the spray skirt and reach down and get to this bag if I needed to during the day. So what's in here is going to be a keeper strap for my sunglasses. I'm likely going to be wearing these. So you need, to have some kind of sunglasses. It's a good idea to have a good pair of sunglasses. And I like to have these little protector things for my nose to protect my nose. I look like a dork, but hey, I'm going to protect the top of my nose. If you happen to wear prescription glasses like I do, this was a really great find that a scout mother turned me on to a few years ago. They're called cocoons, and they're incredibly comfortable, incredibly effective, and they're very inexpensive. And they just fit right over regular glasses. They're quite comfortable. I can have peripheral vision. I can use these mountaineering. They're dark enough to wear right over regular glasses, and they're like $40, which is a screaming good deal for something this high quality. So I use things like this to wear right over the top of my regular glasses, and then I would have some kind of a keeper strap. So make sure, so I have access to that type of stuff. I would have things like sunscreen, lip stuff. I would have my snacks in here, so I'd have like my, Snicker bars or, Power bars, Cliff bars, whatever you like, Costco nut bars. I'd have some snacks in here. I like to wear a thing called a buff, which is just a big polyester fabric tube for protection on my lower face sometimes. So I'd have the buff in here, accessible. This is where I would have access to, although this would most likely be actually being worn. You're going to want to have your waterproof breathable jacket of some kind, your shell jacket. And pretty likely, even in the summertime, it's breezy and wet and splashing on you a lot, that you would be wearing this already. But if you weren't wearing it, I'd want it accessible in your cockpit, so that's why it's in here. And then I would have another layer of synthetic shirt of some type. This happens to just be a long sleeve underwear type layer, accessible. So, repeating, extra insulation, shell, sun protection, eye protection, snacks, water. All of those things need to be accessible in your cockpit because you're not going to get to the other main compartments of the boat. So if you will be wearing a spray skirt, which looks like this. So this much of your body, and then the rest of your body's down inside the boat. So really what we're worrying about is the exposure of your arm area, your upper chest, and your head. And so this actually provides a lot of extra protection as well while you're actually boating. There's an inner pocket in here that you can put sunscreen and snacks. And then I already mentioned that you're going to have, this will be worn over it as well, like this. Anyway, I don't have it adjusted. There's a pocket, you can put more snacks or sunscreen. That's what you'll actually be wearing when you're kayaking. So think in terms of that as far as protection. Now, unlike backpacking, where we generally would never carry a second set of clothing, I highly recommend that you have a set of clothing you've dedicated for boating and and then another set of clothing that you're going to wear in camp. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the things that I might carry in camp. And remember that I'm trying to cover 5 environmental conditions: sun or heat and warmth, cold, wetness, wind, and bugs. Those are the 5 conditions that my apparel system has to try to address. So as I pull things out of this bag, you can think about what it addresses. So, I like to have a warm hat, so some kind of a warm hat, wool or fleece, some sort of sun hat. Now, why do I have 2 sun hats? Well, one of the ways I like to stay cool when I'm actually paddling is to take this hat that I've been wearing paddling and dip it in the actual water, stick it on my head, and let evaporative cooling cool myself off. Well, if I'm doing that, then that hat's going to get really disgusting and gross because it's going to be crusted in salt because it's being dipped in salt water. So when I get to camp, I'm going to want a nicer hat to wear in camp. And you're not backpacking, so you have the luxury to take as many hats as you like. So I take a second hat for camp. The hats can be all over the map in terms of what you might want to wear. You might want to wear big, brimmed hats like this. I would just make sure that if you have a brimmed hat, it has some sort of chin strap because the wind can certainly blow them off. So having a chin strap is a good thing because the wind can make a hat like this blow off. This particular one has a skirt. And there's also sun hats that are more like baseball hats, but that have sun skirts as well. And in this case, they're removable. But think in terms of having some kind of sun hat, both for out on the water and in camp. I take a headlamp. In this case, because it's kayaking, I have a waterproof one. You need 1 layer for warmth. And that can be a variety of things, whatever you already own. I like to take a real thin puffy jacket. So, this is just a real very, very thin puffy jacket. Or some of you probably, most of you I suspect, own some kind of fleece jacket. I don't take both. I would take one or the other as a warm jacket meant in camp. Neither of these would be worn while you're paddling. They would be too warm. But you definitely were going to want something in the evenings. I'm going to want some kind of long pants for camp. So this is just a pair of Supplex nylon synthetic pants. You know, just a lightweight, quick drying pant. And sometimes I'll go to the trouble to take shorts. So here's a pair of the same thing, only in shorts. Supplex, quick drying, nylon type shorts. Some of you have pants where the leg zips off. You could certainly wear that, and it kills two birds with one stone, so to speak. One pair of pants does both jobs. I'm not a big fan of those zip-off leg things. I think they're kind of strange. So I go to the trouble to carry separate shorts and long pants. That's for sun and for bugs. I'm going to want shirts in camp, and I wouldn't necessarily take both of these. I would take one or the other. But this is an example of a synthetic shirt that's also pretty hard for bugs to bite through. You find this is fishing apparel a lot of times. This has a high sunscreen factor and good for bugs and sun, or a sun hoodie. So here's an example of I already showed you a sun hoodie. I could be wearing a sun hoodie while I paddle during the day. I would have a second sun hoodie for camp wear. Not necessarily take both, but one or the other. Synthetic, not cotton. If I was concerned to be a little chilly, I might take some long underwear bottoms, polyester, long johns. You'll notice that these were not in the carry-on bag that's in the cockpit because it's highly unlikely you would ever need this when you were actually kayaking. This would be more for camp wear at night. Sort of like if you had a particularly thin sleeping bag, you might supplement your sleeping bag by wearing these like a pair of pajamas. I'm going to have extra synthetic underwear. And rain pants. Again, you're highly unlikely to need this while you're actually kayaking, because remember, you're sitting down inside the boat, you have a spray skirt on, you have all this other stuff. But if it was prolonged rain, you might want rain pants in camp. So here's a pair of rain pants. These particular ones have full side zippers like I would use mountaineering. If that's what you have, take those. But they don't have to have side zippers. If you have rain pants that just have, they're pull on and they have some kind of partial zipper that goes to the knee, they work fine too. It's whatever you have. I take one pair of warm socks in case my feet get cold in camp. And I take a pair of, this is an exotic piece of gear, but I take waterproof breathable Gore-Tex socks. And here's why. If I have my sandals, let's find it under here somewhere. Yeah. If I'm taking sandals as my camp shoe, and I have wool socks and I have waterproof socks, I have this incredibly versatile footwear system. When it's sunny out and all I need is the sandal, I can wear the sandal. If it gets cold out, I can wear socks with the sandals and be Northwest sandal sock guy number 76 or whatever. And I have warm feet. If it's raining out, I can put on the waterproof socks and the sandals, and I have waterproof dry feet. And if it's wet and cold, I wear the Gore-Tex socks over the wool socks with the sandal. So I get an incredibly versatile, wide range of use out of just one set of stuff that I don't have much stuff to pack. The only couple of specialized pieces of gear that you might want to consider, we're going to issue you the life jacket. Carrying water bottles is actually quite difficult, accessing them and actually carrying them in the kayak. They don't sit on the deck of the boat very well under the deck bungees. You're probably most likely going to have it down inside the cockpit, which means you're going to have to pop your spray skirt, reach down, get your bottle, get a drink, put it away, put your spray skirt back on. If you already own, because you run or bicycle or jog or whatever you do, that got you to already have some kind of hydration system. I love hydrations for systems for kayaking. So I have a fancy hydration system that rides on the back of my PFD. What I'm telling you is if you already own something like this, a Camelback type product like this, you should bring it to the training in June when we do our on-water training, and we should try to fit it over your PFD and see if it's going to work. And if it works, I highly recommend that as the absolute most convenient way to drink on a kayaking trip as a hydration system. I'm not providing that because it's quite expensive and exotic. A thing. But if you have something like that that's going to work, I highly recommend it. I don't necessarily recommend that you go out and purchase fancy paddling gloves. This is a summer style synthetic paddling glove because the paddle shafts are quite smooth. I teach you how to paddle properly. People seldom ever develop blisters. But if after the training session you determine that maybe you think you want some sort of a paddling glove, you might want to consider something like that. I do recommend this type of paddling glove. The water is very, very cold, and your hand's going to be on a paddle, water's going to be running up and down the paddle, you're dipping your hand in the water some of the time. So if you wanted to buy one specialized piece of gear for this particular trip, I'm a real fan of neoprene type gloves. And so, you just want to find a glove that has some kind of shape to it, and it's thin enough that you can feel like you can grab the paddle shaft. That's a good piece of gear to have. But again, you don't have to have this. This last segment, what I want to do is quickly talk about the bags themselves. We've already mentioned that the least expensive way of doing it is to use a garbage bag lining a nylon stuff sack that you already have. And there's nothing wrong with that system. But I'm going to show you those other bags that we were getting. This is what those bags would have looked like empty. They're 13 inches wide by approximately 20 inches to where the roll down would end. And the manufacturer calls this particular bag a medium. Now, some of the bags that are out there on the market are round like this stuff sack is. Just so you know, this stuff sack is 9 inches across diameter and about 12 inches. So 12 by 9 circular stuff sack versus 13 by 20 flat. Now, these round bags are much easier to pack, meaning because it has a three-dimensional shape to it, it's much easier to get stuff into these bags. But when you go to pack these bags into the kayak, they're a bigger hassle to pack because they have assumed a particular shape that won't change. And you have to try to force this round cylindrical shape into a triangular shaped space. So I work harder at trying to get the gear into flat bags because I then know that the flat bags will pack into the boat much easier. Is that making sense? So all of those, that red bag, blue bag, and yellow bag were all this. This is kind of what the current color of those bags, if you were to go buy them, is kind of this green color right here. And that's what they would look like. So if I was buying fancy bags, I would buy at least two of these, one for my sleeping bag and one for my clothes. If I was buying that type of bag as a cockpit bag, it's called size small. So it's 8 inches across, it's 1 inch narrower, and about 12 inches where the place for the roll down is, and it's called size small, and it's about 5 liters. So a real nice bare bones minimum would be 2 of these and 1 of these would be a great way to start the trip. If I wanted to protect my tent, I would get a 3rd one, and if I wanted to protect my sleeping pad, I get a long version of this, if that's making sense. Other bags that you could use, they also come in smaller sizes. You can use backpacking dry bag type stuff sacks. So this is a stuff sack where the seams have been seam sealed and it has a roll down closure. You can certainly use these. What you don't want to do is use the same thing when it's out of lightweight fabrics. So here is the same brand, same draw lightweight bag. But the problem with this is that the fabric itself is too lightweight. And when you're shoving this into the kayak, you're going to just poke holes in this and rip it and shred it. This is out of a tougher, more Oxford weight fabric, and in fact will hold up to the abuse of going in and outside of the kayak. So that's why I'm showing you examples of different kinds of things that you can find backpacking. If you already own vinyl type PVC bags, you can certainly use them. But the nylon ones are better because they slide in and out of the kayak much easier and quicker, and they don't get stuck on the kayak like these vinyl bags do. So don't buy money on shaped bags. You think these would work great? That's not the shape of the kayak. That's the shape of a 1950s whitewater kayak. So don't buy bags like that. This is actually the shape of a sea kayak. But you don't need, which is, see the difference? And that other bag tapered from both sides. This tapers the way a sea kayak would shape, but you don't need bags like this unless you're really into it. Don't waste money on bags that have openings like duffel bags along the whole length of the bag, because when you roll this stuff up, this is really bulky and hard to get into the kayak. And don't waste money on bags that have windows. You can remember what you stuck in there. You don't have to have a window just to see into the bag. So the point being is you don't have to have fancy bags. You can get by with plastic lined stuff sacks. But if you are going to buy bags, I recommend nylon bags that are flat shaped. And if you want, these bags can actually be purchased at a discount from a retail store in Issaquah called the Kayak Academy. And if you say that you've been trained by Karl, they'll give you like a 10% discount or whatever on those bags. But those bags work particularly well. So hopefully I've given you some ideas about utilizing the bags that you may already have at home, or if you have the luxury of being able to buy the specific bags, that you at least have a good idea of what you should buy. So thanks for your attention tonight.